The rain had been falling for 3 days straight when Florence Olmstead realized her husband was not coming back for her and their 2-year-old son. And that realization hit her harder than the howling wind that threatened to tear apart the canvas wagon cover above her head. She sat huddled in the back of the covered wagon, her arms wrapped tightly around little Thomas, who whimpered against her chest as thunder cracked across the darkened sky. They had stopped here, along the muddy road leading into Ukiah, California, because Marcus had said he needed to ride ahead to secure lodging. That had been yesterday morning. The storm had worsened throughout the day, turning the road into a river of mud, and still he had not returned. Florence had waited, telling herself he was simply delayed, that the weather had forced him to take shelter somewhere. But as the hours stretched into a full day and night, and now into this second miserable morning, the truth settled into her bones with cold certainty. Marcus had left them. He had finally done what he had threatened to do during their arguments over the past months. He had grown tired of fatherhood, tired of responsibility, tired of her. The realization made her feel hollowed out, as if someone had scooped away everything inside her chest and left only an aching void. Thomas coughed, a wet rattling sound that terrified her. She pressed her hand to his forehead and felt the heat radiating from his small body. Fever. Her son was developing a fever, and she was stuck in this wagon with dwindling supplies, no money beyond the few coins in her pocket, and no idea what to do next. "Mama," Thomas whispered, his voice hoarse. "Cold." "I know, sweetheart," Florence said, pulling the thin blanket tighter around them both. The blanket was damp, like everything else in the wagon. Water had been seeping in through the canvas for hours, pooling on the wagon floor, soaking into their clothes and belongings. "I know you are cold. Mama is going to fix this." But how? She looked around the wagon at their meager possessions. Marcus had taken the horses. Of course he had. She had only realized that this morning when she had finally forced herself to check outside. Both horses were gone, along with his saddle and saddlebags. He had planned this. While she slept that first night, exhausted from caring for Thomas during the storm, Marcus had unhitched the horses and ridden away, leaving them stranded. Florence was 23 years old, and she had never felt so utterly alone in her life. She had married Marcus 3 years ago in Missouri, believing his promises of a better life in California. Her parents had died of cholera the year before, and she had no siblings, no family to fall back on. Marcus had seemed like salvation then, with his easy smile and talk of gold still to be found in California, of opportunities for a man willing to work hard. She had been desperate and grieving, and she had believed him. What a fool she had been. Thomas coughed again, more violently this time, and Florence made a decision. She could not stay here. The wagon offered no real shelter, not in this storm, and Thomas needed medicine, warmth, and proper care. Ukiah could not be more than a few miles ahead. If she walked, carrying Thomas, surely she could reach the town before nightfall. She gathered what she could carry, wrapping their few clothes and her mother's Bible in an oilcloth. She tucked the coins from her pocket into her bodice, then wrapped Thomas in the driest blanket she could find before lifting him into her arms. He was heavy for a 2-year-old, solid and real against her chest, and she felt a fierce surge of love and determination. She would not let her son suffer because of Marcus's cowardice. Florence climbed down from the wagon into ankle-deep mud. The rain immediately plastered her dark hair to her skull and soaked through her dress. She had no coat, no hat. Marcus had taken those two, she realized. Probably sold them somewhere along the road for drinking money. She started walking, each step a battle against the sucking mud and the wind that seemed determined to push her backwards. Thomas buried his face against her neck, his small body trembling with chills despite his fever. Florence leaned forward into the wind and kept moving. The road was barely visible through the sheets of rain. Water ran in streams across the packed earth, carving deep gullies and washing away anything not firmly rooted. Florence's shoes, already worn thin from months of travel, filled with water and mud. Her feet went numb, but she kept walking, one foot in front of the other. That was all she could do. Keep moving forward. Time became meaningless. She did not know if she had been walking for an hour or 3 hours. The world narrowed to the road ahead, the weight of Thomas in her arms, and the sound of her own labored breathing beneath the roar of the storm. Her arms ached, her back screamed in protest, but she did not stop. Then Thomas's weight shifted and she looked down to see his eyes rolling back in his head. "No," Florence gasped, stumbling to a halt. "Thomas, no, stay with me. Please, baby, stay with me." But his body went limp in her arms, unconscious from the fever. Panic clawed up Florence's throat. She had to get help. She had to get him to a doctor, to warmth, to medicine. She tried to run, but the mud and exhaustion made it impossible. She managed only a few lurching steps before her foot caught on something hidden in the mud, and she fell forward, twisting her body at the last second to take the impact on her shoulder and hip, protecting Thomas with her body. Pain exploded through her side as she hit the ground. The oilcloth bundle flew from her hand, landing several feet away in a puddle. Florence lay in the mud for a moment, gasping, her ribs screaming, still clutching Thomas against her chest. Rain pounded down on them. She tried to push herself up, but her body would not cooperate. Her arms trembled with exhaustion. Her legs felt like water. Thomas lay unconscious in her arms, his small chest barely rising and falling. This could not be how it ended. She had survived losing her parents, survived Marcus's neglect and eventual abandonment. She would survive this too. She had to, for Thomas. Florence managed to get to her knees, then tried to stand, but her legs buckled. She crashed back down into the mud with a cry of frustration and despair. Her vision blurred with rain and tears. She could not do this. She could not carry Thomas any further. They were going to die here on this muddy road, and no one would even know. "Help," she tried to call out, but her voice was lost in the wind. "Please, someone help us." The storm swallowed her words. Florence bent over Thomas, covering his body with hers, trying to shield him from the worst of the rain. She prayed, words tumbling from her lips in a desperate stream. She prayed to a God she was not sure was listening, begged for a miracle, for someone to find them, for Thomas to open his eyes. The sound of hoofbeats barely registered at first. Florence thought she might be hallucinating, her desperate mind conjuring rescue from nothing. But the sound grew louder, closer, and then a voice called out through the storm. "Hello, is someone there?" Florence lifted her head, squinting through the rain. A figure on horseback materialized from the gray curtain of the storm, riding toward her. She tried to call out again, but all that emerged was a broken sob. The rider reached her in moments, swinging down from his horse before the animal had fully stopped. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a long oilskin coat and a hat pulled low against the rain. He dropped to his knees in the mud beside her. "Madam, are you hurt?" His voice was deep, urgent with concern. "My son," Florence gasped. "Please, my son, he has a fever. He is unconscious. Please help him." The man did not hesitate. He scooped Thomas from her arms with surprising gentleness, cradling the small body against his chest. "Can you stand? We need to get you both out of this storm." Florence tried, but her legs would not hold her. She collapsed again, and before she could feel the shame of her weakness, the man made a decision. He whistled sharply, and his horse trotted closer. With Thomas secured in one arm, the man reached down and lifted Florence with the other, displaying a strength that would have amazed her if she had been capable of amazement in that moment. He settled her onto his horse, then handed Thomas back to her, before swinging up behind them both. His arms came around them, reaching for the reins, creating a solid wall against the storm. Florence sagged back against his chest, barely conscious, holding Thomas tightly. "I have got you," the man said, his voice close to her ear. "Both of you, hold on." The horse began to move, and Florence let her eyes close. She had no strength left, nothing but the last shreds of her will to keep her arms locked around her son. The man's solid presence at her back was the only thing keeping her upright, and she leaned into it, too exhausted and desperate to care about propriety. Time passed in a blur of rain and the rhythmic movement of the horse. Florence drifted in and out of awareness. At some point she felt them stop, heard voices, felt herself being lifted down. Strong arms carried her, and she forced her eyes open to see the dim interior of a building, lamplight, concerned faces. "My son," she tried to say. "Please." "The boy is here," the deep voice said. The same man who had found them. "He is right here. We are getting you both warm and dry." Florence was lowered onto something soft. A bed. Hands worked at her wet clothes, stripping away the sodden dress and replacing it with something dry and warm. A blanket settled over her, heavy and blissfully warm. She wanted to protest, to insist they care for Thomas first, but her body betrayed her, exhaustion dragging her down into darkness. When Florence woke, the first thing she heard was the gentle crackling of a fire. The second thing she noticed was that she was warm, genuinely warm for the first time in days. The third thing was the panic that shot through her as she realized she did not know where Thomas was. She sat up abruptly, ignoring the protests from her bruised body, and looked wildly around the room. It was small but clean, with wooden walls and simple furnishings. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, flames dancing cheerfully behind an iron grate. And there, in a chair pulled close to the fire, sat the man who had rescued them, holding Thomas in his arms. The man looked up at her movement, and for the first time Florence saw his face clearly. He was perhaps 30 years old, with dark hair that curled slightly at the ends and a strong jaw shadowed with stubble. His eyes were a striking shade of gray-green, and they regarded her with a calm steadiness that somehow made her feel immediately safer. "Your son is all right," he said quietly. "The fever broke about an hour ago. He is sleeping now." Florence felt tears spring to her eyes. "Truly, truly." Doc Harrison came and looked at him, said it was mostly exhaustion and exposure, but that we caught it in time. He gave him some medicine and said rest and warmth would do the rest. "Thank God," Florence whispered, pressing her hands to her face. The relief was so intense it made her dizzy. "Thank God and thank you. I do not even know your name. You saved our lives." "Nathan Pierce," the man said. He shifted carefully, rising from the chair with Thomas still cradled in his arms. "And you do not need to thank me, madam. Anyone would have done the same." Florence doubted that, but she did not argue. "I am Florence Olmstead. This is Thomas." Nathan carried Thomas to the bed and carefully laid him beside Florence. The little boy looked peaceful in sleep, his cheeks flushed with health rather than fever now. Florence immediately gathered him close, needing to feel the warmth of his body, to reassure herself that he was truly all right. "Where are we?" she asked, looking up at Nathan. "My ranch. It is about 2 miles outside Ukiah proper. I was riding back from checking my northern fence line when I found you." He paused, and Florence saw something shift in his expression. "Madam, I do not mean to pry, but what were you doing out in that storm? Where is your husband?" The question hit Florence like a physical blow. She looked down at Thomas, at his small, sleeping face, and felt shame burn through her. "I do not know," she said quietly. "He left us, rode ahead 3 days ago and never came back, took the horses and left us stranded in the wagon." She heard Nathan's sharp intake of breath, but could not bring herself to look at him. What must he think of her? A woman abandoned by her husband, so worthless that her own spouse had left her on a muddy road in the middle of a storm. "That is not right," Nathan said, his voice tight with anger. "No man should abandon his family. No real man, anyway." The fierce conviction in his words made Florence look up. Nathan's jaw was clenched, his eyes hard. He looked genuinely angry, but not at her, for her. Did he say where he was going? Give any indication of his plans? Nathan asked. Florence shook her head. "He said he was riding ahead to secure lodging in Ukiah, but I think he planned this. He took everything of value, left us with almost nothing." Nathan was quiet for a moment, and Florence could see him thinking, weighing something. Finally, he said, "You and Thomas can stay here for as long as you need, until you figure out what you want to do next." "I cannot," Florence said automatically. "I could not impose on you like that. You have already done so much." "It is not an imposition," Nathan said firmly. "I have plenty of room. This ranch is too big for one man anyway. And you need time to recover, to let Thomas recover. You need a safe place." "I have no money," Florence admitted, the words bitter in her mouth. "I have maybe $3 to my name. I cannot pay you for lodging." "I am not asking for payment," Nathan said. "I am offering shelter. There is a difference." Florence stared at him, trying to understand why this stranger would make such an offer. What did he want from her? What would he expect in return? She had learned, over the past 3 years with Marcus, that nothing came without strings attached. Nathan seemed to read the wariness in her expression, because he held up his hands in a placating gesture. "I am not asking for anything in return, madam. I am not that kind of man. You and Thomas can have this room. I will sleep in the main house. You will have privacy and safety. That is all I am offering." "Why?" Florence asked bluntly. "You do not know me. You do not owe me anything." Nathan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft but carried a weight of old pain. "Because 5 years ago my sister was in a similar situation. Her husband left her with 2 small children. She tried to make it on her own, too proud to ask for help. She died that winter and the children with her. I found out too late to do anything." He met Florence's eyes. "So maybe this is not about you, madam. Maybe this is about me not being too late this time." The raw honesty in his words silenced any further protest Florence might have made. She saw the grief in his eyes, still fresh despite the years, and understood that this offer was as much for him as it was for her. "All right," she said quietly. "Thank you, Mr. Pierce. We will stay just until I can figure out what to do next." "Nathan," he said, "just Nathan. And take all the time you need." He left then, closing the door quietly behind him, and Florence was alone with Thomas. She lay down beside her son, pulling him close, and let herself cry silently into the pillow. She cried for the life she had thought she would have, for the man she had believed Marcus could be, for her own naivety and poor choices. But underneath the grief and shame, there was also relief. They were safe. Thomas was going to be all right. And Nathan Pierce, whoever he was, had given them a lifeline when they had needed it most. Florence woke in the morning to weak sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee and frying bacon. Thomas was awake beside her, his eyes bright and curious as he looked around the unfamiliar room. "Mama," he said, his voice still hoarse but much stronger than yesterday. "Where are we?" "Somewhere safe," Florence told him, pressing a kiss to his forehead. His skin was cool to the touch, the fever completely gone. "How do you feel, sweetheart? "Hungry," Thomas announced, and Florence laughed despite everything. If he was hungry, he was definitely on the mend. A soft knock came at the door, and Nathan's voice called, "Mrs. Olmstead. I have brought some breakfast if you and Thomas are feeling up to it." "Just a moment," Florence called back. She looked down at herself and realized she was wearing a nightgown she did not recognize. It was clean and soft, clearly well made and far too big for her. She flushed, realizing that someone must have undressed her last night. She hoped it had been a woman and not Nathan, though either option was mortifying. She found her dress hanging by the fire, clean and dry. Someone had washed the mud out of it. Florence dressed quickly, then helped Thomas into his clothes, which had also been washed and dried. Then she opened the door. Nathan stood in the hallway, holding a wooden tray laden with food. In the morning light, Florence could see him more clearly. He was a handsome man, she realized, with strong features and those unusual gray-green eyes. He was dressed for work in sturdy canvas trousers and a worn flannel shirt, his dark hair still damp as if he had recently washed. "Good morning," he said, offering a small smile. "Doc Harrison said you should eat as much as you can. Need to rebuild your strength." He carried the tray into the room and set it on a small table by the window. Florence saw eggs, bacon, toast with butter, and what looked like oatmeal with honey. There was milk for Thomas and coffee for her. Her stomach growled audibly at the sight of so much food. "This is too much," she protested weakly. "Eat what you can," Nathan said. "Thomas, how are you feeling this morning, young man?" Thomas, usually shy around strangers, surprised Florence by smiling at Nathan. "Better. Mama says we are somewhere safe." "That is right," Nathan said, crouching down to Thomas's level. "This is my ranch. Do you like horses, Thomas?" Thomas nodded enthusiastically. "Well, when you are feeling stronger, maybe I can show you my horses. Would you like that?" "Yes, please," Thomas said, his eyes lighting up. Nathan straightened and looked at Florence. "I will leave you to eat. If you need anything at all, just holler. I will be working in the barn most of the morning." After he left, Florence and Thomas ate. The food was simple but delicious, and Florence found herself eating far more than she had intended. Thomas cleaned his plate and asked for more milk, which Florence found in a pitcher Nathan had left on the tray. As they ate, Florence looked around the room more carefully. It was clearly meant to be a guest room or perhaps a room for a daughter. The bed was sturdy and well made, with a beautiful quilt in shades of blue and green. There was a dresser against one wall, a washstand with a porcelain basin and pitcher, and the small table where they were eating. The floor was wood, polished to a warm shine with a braided rug beside the bed. Everything was clean and well maintained. Through the window, Florence could see part of the ranch yard. There was a large barn, several smaller outbuildings and corrals with horses. In the distance, she could see hills rising, still green from winter rains. The storm had passed, leaving behind a washed clean world sparkling in the April sunshine. It was 1875, Florence thought. April of 1875, and her entire life had fallen apart and been rebuilt in the space of a single day. The thought was dizzying. A soft knock came at the door again, and this time a woman's voice called, "Mrs. Olmstead, may I come in? I am Sarah Watts. Nathan asked me to come check on you and the boy. Please come in," Florence called. The door opened to reveal a woman in her mid-40s, plump and cheerful-looking, with graying brown hair pulled back in a bun. She carried a bundle of clothes over one arm. "Well, do not you look better than last night?" Sarah said warmly. "I was the one who helped get you into dry clothes. I hope you do not mind. Nathan sent one of his ranch hands to fetch me when he realized you needed a woman's help." "Thank you," Florence said, feeling some of her embarrassment fade. "I am grateful for everything you did." "Oh, it was nothing. Nathan is a good man, one of the best. When he needs help, folks around here are happy to give it. Sarah set the bundle on the bed. I brought you some clothes. They belong to my daughter. She is married now and living in Sacramento, so I thought these might fit you better than whatever you are wearing. Florence looked at the bundle and felt her throat tighten. I could not possibly accept. Nonsense. What is my daughter going to do with them? She has a whole new wardrobe now. You will be doing me a favor by taking them off my hands. Sarah smiled kindly. Besides, a woman needs proper clothes. Cannot go around in one dress, can you? The practical wisdom of this penetrated Florence's pride. Thank you, she said quietly. You are very kind. Now, Doc Harrison said you took quite a tumble yesterday. How are you feeling? Any pain? Florence realized her ribs were indeed sore, along with her hip and shoulder. A bit bruised, but nothing terrible. Let me take a look anyway. Cannot be too careful. Sarah proved to be surprisingly thorough in her examination, checking Florence's ribs for breaks and examining the bruises on her shoulder and hip. You were lucky, she pronounced. Just bruising. It will hurt for a week or so, but you will mend fine. And this little one. She turned to Thomas with a smile. Feeling better today, Thomas nodded, suddenly shy again now that the attention was on him. Good. Children bounce back fast, thank the Lord. Sarah straightened. Well, I will leave you to rest, but if you need anything, Nathan knows where to find me. I live about a mile down the road with my husband. After Sarah left, Florence examined the clothes she had brought. There were 2 dresses, one a simple brown cotton work dress and the other a nicer calico in blue. There were also undergarments, stockings, and even a shawl. Florence felt tears prick her eyes again at this kindness from strangers. The rest of the day passed quietly. Thomas napped in the afternoon, still recovering his strength, and Florence found herself drifting off as well. When she woke, the sun was slanting through the window in golden afternoon light, and she could hear the sound of hammering from somewhere outside. She got up carefully, her bruised body protesting, and looked out the window. Nathan was in the yard, working on fixing a section of fence. He had shed his shirt in the warm afternoon sun, and Florence found herself watching the play of muscles in his back and shoulders as he worked. He moved with an easy confidence, comfortable in his strength. She turned away from the window, feeling heat in her cheeks. What was she doing, watching him like that? She was a married woman, albeit one whose husband had abandoned her, and Nathan was just being kind. She would not repay his kindness by developing some foolish attraction to him. But that night, when Nathan brought dinner on another tray, Florence found herself watching him anyway. Watching the way he smiled gently at Thomas, the way he asked about their day with genuine interest, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he laughed at something Thomas said. Marcus had never looked at their son with such warmth. Over the next few days, Florence grew stronger. The bruises began to fade from purple to yellow-green. Thomas recovered completely, his energy returning until he was his normal rambunctious self again. Nathan proved to be patient and kind, never pressing them, always giving them space but making it clear they were welcome. On the 4th day, Florence felt well enough to leave the room and explore the rest of the house. Nathan's ranch house was larger than she had realized, with a main living area dominated by a stone fireplace, a kitchen with a cast iron stove, and 2 other bedrooms. Everything was neat, but had the bare quality of a space maintained by someone living alone. There were no curtains on the windows, no decorative touches, no softness to make it a home rather than just a house. She found Nathan in the kitchen, starting to prepare lunch. He looked surprised to see her. "You are up," he said, smiling. "Feeling better, much better, thank you." Florence hesitated, then said, "Nathan, I cannot keep imposing on your hospitality like this. You have been so kind, but I need to start figuring out what I am going to do. I need to find work, a place to stay in town." Nathan's smile faded. He set down the knife he had been using to slice bread and turned to face her fully. "Have I made you feel unwelcome?" "No," Florence said quickly. "Not at all. You have been nothing but generous, but I cannot simply stay here indefinitely living off your charity." "What if it is not charity?" Nathan said quietly. "What if I have a proposition for you?" Florence felt her guard go up immediately. "What kind of proposition?" Nathan held up his hands. "Nothing improper, I swear. Just hear me out." He took a breath. "This ranch is a lot of work. I manage it myself with the help of 3 ranch hands, but the house suffers. I can barely keep up with cooking for myself, let alone cleaning or any of the other things that need doing. I was thinking, maybe you could stay on as my housekeeper. I would pay you a fair wage, room and board for you and Thomas, and you would have stability while you figure out your next step." Florence stared at him. "You want to hire me?" "Yes. I know it is not ideal, you being a married woman and all, but Sarah Watts comes by most days to help with one thing or another. It would be respectable enough, and it would give you time, give you options." "I do not understand why you are doing this," Florence said, searching his face. "You do not know me. You do not owe me anything." Nathan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, as if he was weighing each word. "Maybe I see someone who deserves a chance to get back on her feet. Maybe I remember what I told you about my sister, and I think this is my chance to do what I could not do for her. Or maybe," he paused, then continued, "maybe I just think you and Thomas deserve better than what life has handed you, and I am in a position to help. Does the reason really matter?" Florence found she did not have an answer for that. She looked at Nathan, at his honest face and steady eyes, and made a decision. "All right, I will stay. I will work as your housekeeper, but only if you truly pay me a wage. I will not be a charity case." "Agreed," Nathan said, and his smile returned, warm and genuine. $20 a month plus room and board." Florence's eyes widened. $20 was a generous wage, more than fair for housekeeping work. "That is too much." "That is what I am offering," Nathan said firmly. "You will earn it, I promise. This place needs a lot of work." So Florence stayed. She threw herself into the work, grateful for something to do, for a purpose beyond simply surviving. The house was indeed in need of a woman's touch. She cleaned thoroughly, scrubbing floors and washing windows, beating dust from the rugs and linens. She cooked meals, real meals with vegetables and proper seasoning, not just the basic bachelor fare Nathan had been making for himself. She mended his clothes, which were clean but showed clear signs of rough repair work. And slowly, day by day, the house began to transform. Florence found curtains stored in a trunk and hung them in the windows. She rearranged furniture to make the spaces more welcoming. She put wildflowers in jars on the table and windowsills. The house began to feel like a home. Thomas thrived in this new environment. He followed Nathan around whenever the cowboy had time, watching him work with the horses, learning to feed the chickens, collecting eggs. Nathan was patient with him, answering his endless questions, teaching him small tasks appropriate for a 2-year-old. Florence watched them together and felt her heart ache with a confusing mix of emotions. Gratitude, certainly. Relief that Thomas had a good male figure in his life. But there was something else too, something warmer and more complicated that she was not ready to examine too closely. 2 weeks after Florence had started working for Nathan, Sarah Watts came by for one of her regular visits. She found Florence in the kitchen, kneading bread dough. "My goodness," Sarah said, looking around. "You have certainly made this place homey. I have been trying to get Nathan to fix up this house properly for years, but he always said there was no point when it was just him." Florence felt her cheeks warm. I hope I have not overstepped. I just thought overstepped. Honey, this is wonderful. That boy has been living like a hermit for too long. Sarah settled into a chair at the kitchen table. I wanted to talk to you about something, actually. There has been talk in town. Florence's hands stilled in the dough. What kind of talk? Nothing bad, Sarah assured her quickly. Just people wondering about you. A few folks asked me if Nathan had gotten himself a wife without telling anyone. Florence felt heat flood her face. I am his housekeeper, that is all. I know that and you know that, but people talk. I'm not saying you are doing anything wrong, you understand. I know you are still married, even if that worthless husband of yours ran off. I just wanted to give you a heads up that people are curious. What should I do? Florence asked, anxiety coiling in her stomach. The last thing she wanted was to cause trouble for Nathan or to damage her own reputation. A woman alone, even one with a child, had to be careful of her reputation. Keep doing what you are doing, Sarah said firmly. You are working for wages. You have separate sleeping quarters, and I visit regularly enough that everyone knows this is a proper arrangement. But you might want to come into town with me sometime. Let people meet you. See that you are a respectable woman. It is harder to gossip about someone you have actually met. So the following Sunday, Florence dressed in the nicer calico dress Sarah had given her, got Thomas ready, and rode into Ukiah with Nathan and Sarah. The town was larger than Florence had expected, with a main street lined with businesses and several side streets with houses. There was a church at the north end of town, a white clapboard building with a small steeple. Nathan helped Florence down from the wagon, his hands steady on her waist, and she tried to ignore the flutter in her stomach at his touch. They walked into church together, and Florence felt the weight of curious stares. Nathan seemed unbothered, nodding greetings to people, introducing Florence simply as his housekeeper. After the service, several women approached them, including the minister's wife, a kind-faced woman named Margaret Donovan. They welcomed Florence warmly, asked after Thomas, and invited her to join the church women's auxiliary. Florence accepted gratefully, understanding that this was her pathway to respectability in this community. As they drove back to the ranch that afternoon, Thomas asleep between them on the wagon seat, Nathan said, "You handled that well. I know it could not have been easy, all those people staring and wondering." "Your reputation is good here," Florence observed. "People respect you." Nathan shrugged. "I have lived here for 7 years, worked hard, kept my word. That counts for something." "Tell me about your ranch," Florence said. "How did you end up here?" Nathan was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the road ahead. "I came west after the war. Fought for the Union. Saw things I would rather forget. When it was over, I just wanted to find somewhere peaceful, somewhere I could work with my hands and not think too much. Ended up in California, worked as a ranch hand for a few years, saved my money. Bought this land 5 years ago and have been building it up ever since." "And your sister?" Florence asked gently. "You said she died. Was that before or after you bought the ranch?" "After. She was back in Kansas still, married to a man I never liked. When he left her, I sent word for her to come join me, that I would take care of her and the children. But she was too proud or maybe too ashamed. She wrote back saying she could manage. By the time I got word that she had died, it was 6 months past. 6 months, and I did not even know." His hands tightened on the reins. "I swore then that if I ever had the chance to help someone in a similar situation, I would not let pride or propriety stop me." Florence understood then, truly understood, why Nathan had helped her. It was not about her at all. It was about a promise he had made to himself, a way to make peace with a guilt that still haunted him. "I am sorry," she said quietly. "I am sorry you lost her, but Nathan, you could not have forced her to accept help. Maybe not, but I could have tried harder. He glanced at her, and his expression softened. I am glad you let me help you, Florence. I know it was not easy for you to accept. Florence realized it was the first time he had used her given name rather than calling her Mrs. Olmstead. Something in her chest tightened at the sound of it in his voice. I am glad, too, she said softly. The summer months passed in a rhythm of work and quiet domesticity. Florence settled into her role as housekeeper, and the ranch prospered under Nathan's steady management. Thomas grew like a weed, his vocabulary expanding daily, his confidence building as Nathan taught him about horses and ranching and the land. And Florence found herself falling in love. She tried to fight it. She told herself she was still legally married to Marcus. Never mind that he had abandoned them. She told herself Nathan was just being kind, that he saw her as a responsibility, not a woman. She told herself she was foolish to develop feelings for another man so soon after her marriage had fallen apart. But the heart does not listen to such logical arguments. She fell in love with the way Nathan sang quietly to himself while he worked, old war songs transformed into something bittersweet and beautiful. She fell in love with his gentle patience with Thomas, the way he never talked down to a child but treated him like a small person deserving of respect. She fell in love with his work-roughened hands and the way they could be surprisingly gentle, whether soothing a skittish horse or carefully setting a broken teacup that had been Florence's mother's. She fell in love with his integrity, the way he always kept his word, the way he dealt fairly with everyone from his ranch hands to the shopkeepers in town. She fell in love with his rare smiles, which transformed his usually serious face into something warm and boyish. She fell in love with the way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not paying attention, with an expression that made her breath catch. But she said nothing. What could she say? She was another man's wife, and even though Marcus had abandoned them, there had been no formal dissolution of their marriage. She would not dishonor Nathan's kindness by putting him in an impossible position. In late August, everything changed. Florence was in town, shopping for supplies with Thomas in tow. She was coming out of the general store when she saw a familiar figure down the street. Her heart stopped. Marcus. He was thinner than she remembered, his clothes dusty and worn, but it was unmistakably him. He was talking to another man outside the saloon, gesturing emphatically about something. Florence's first instinct was to grab Thomas and run. She did not want to face Marcus, did not want to hear whatever excuses or lies he might offer. But before she could move, Thomas spotted his father. "Papa." Thomas called out, his voice carrying down the street. Marcus turned, his eyes widening as he saw them. For a moment, he looked like he might run. Then his expression hardened into something calculating, and he walked toward them. "Florence," he said, nodding to her as if they were casual acquaintances, not husband and wife. "Thomas." "What are you doing here?" Florence asked, her voice cold. "I came back for you," Marcus said, but the words sounded rehearsed. "I had some business to attend to, could not get back sooner. But I knew you would find your way to Ukiah. Figured I would find you here eventually." The lie was so blatant that Florence almost laughed. "You left us stranded in a storm. You took the horses and everything of value." Marcus had the decency to look ashamed, at least briefly. "I know it looks bad, but I can explain. I ran into some trouble, needed to move fast. I was going to come back for you." "It has been 4 months, Marcus. 4 months," he blinked as if genuinely surprised. "Has it been that long? Well, I am here now. Where are you staying?" "We should get our things and move on. I have got a lead on some work in Sacramento." "No," Florence said, surprised by the firmness in her own voice. Marcus frowned. "No, what do you mean, no?" "I mean I am not going anywhere with you. You abandoned us. You left your son to die in a storm." You do not get to just walk back into our lives and act as if nothing happened. Marcus's expression turned ugly. You are my wife. Thomas is my son. You do not get to tell me no. Florence felt fear flutter in her stomach, but she stood her ground. I am staying in Ukiah. I have work here, a place to live. We are settled. Work? Marcus looked her up and down, and something unpleasant entered his eyes. What kind of work? You living with some man, Florence. That why you do not want to come with me? I am working as a housekeeper, Florence said icily. For a respectable rancher, it is honest work. I bet it is, Marcus sneered. Well, it does not matter. You are coming with me. You and Thomas both. I have a right to my family. You gave up that right when you left us, Florence said. She picked up Thomas, who had been watching this exchange with wide, frightened eyes. We are not going with you, Marcus. Leave us alone. She turned to walk away, but Marcus grabbed her arm, his grip bruising. You do not walk away from me. Let her go. Florence looked up to see Nathan standing a few feet away. He must have seen the confrontation and come over. His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. Marcus did not let go. This is none of your business, friend. This is between me and my wife. I will not say it again, Nathan said, his voice still quiet but somehow more dangerous for it. Let her go. Something in Nathan's stance, or maybe the look in his eyes, made Marcus release Florence's arm, but he puffed up his chest, trying to salvage some pride. You must be the rancher she is housekeeping for. Convenient arrangement that. You know she is married, right? My wife, my son. Not yours. I am aware, Nathan said. I am also aware that you left them to die in a storm. So you will understand if I do not put much stock in your claims of ownership. I've got legal rights, Marcus blustered. She is my wife. Then take it to a lawyer, Nathan said calmly. But Florence has made it clear she does not want to go with you, so I suggest you leave her alone. Marcus looked between them, his face reddening with anger and humiliation. This is not over, he said to Florence. You are still my wife. I will be back. He stalked away toward the saloon, and Florence felt her knees go weak with relief. Nathan stepped closer, his hand steadying her elbow. Are you all right? He asked quietly. Yes, thank you. Florence looked down at Thomas, who was clinging to her neck. I did not expect to see him. Come on, Nathan said. Let us get you home. They rode back to the ranch in tense silence. Thomas fell asleep against Florence's shoulder, exhausted by the emotional confrontation. When they arrived, Nathan helped Florence down from the wagon and carried Thomas inside, laying him gently on the bed in their room. In the kitchen, Nathan poured them both coffee and sat down across from Florence at the table. Do you want to talk about it? Florence wrapped her hands around the warm mug, grateful for something to hold on to. I thought I would be relieved to see him, to know he was alive. Instead, I just felt anger and disgust. He stood there and lied to my face, acted as if he had done nothing wrong. He is a coward, Nathan said flatly. Any man who would abandon his family is a coward. He said he has legal rights. Is that true? Can he force me to go with him? Nathan's jaw tightened. Legally, yes. A husband has rights over his wife and children, but there are limits to those rights, especially if he can be proved to have abandoned you. We could talk to a lawyer, see about getting a legal separation or even a divorce. Divorce, Florence whispered. The word felt scandalous, heavy with social stigma. Divorced women were not accepted in polite society. They were viewed as failures, as damaged goods. I know it is not ideal, Nathan said carefully, but Florence, you deserve to be free of him. You deserve to build a life without looking over your shoulder, wondering when he will show up again. Florence looked at Nathan, at his earnest face, and felt her heart clench. Why do you care so much? Why does my situation matter to you? Nathan was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low, intense. Because somewhere along the way you stopped being a responsibility and became someone I care about. You and Thomas both. I care about what happens to you. I care about your happiness, your safety." He paused, then added softly, "I care about you, Florence. More than I should, probably, given that you are another man's wife, but I cannot seem to help it." Florence's breath caught. "Nathan, you do not have to say anything," Nathan said quickly. "I know the situation is complicated. I am not asking for anything. I just needed you to know that you are not alone in this. Whatever you decide to do about Marcus, I will support you. If you want to pursue a divorce, I will help you. If you want to stay married and just keep things as they are, I will respect that. But you should know that you have options. You have someone in your corner." Florence felt tears spill down her cheeks. "I do not deserve your kindness." "Yes, you do," Nathan said fiercely. "You deserve kindness and respect and a hell of a lot more than what Marcus gave you. You are a strong, capable, beautiful woman, Florence. You are an amazing mother. You work harder than anyone I know. You deserve the world. Beautiful." He thought she was beautiful. Florence looked at Nathan, at his gray-green eyes blazing with conviction, and felt something break open inside her chest. "I care about you too," she whispered. "I've been trying not to, telling myself it was wrong, but I do. I care about you so much it frightens me." Nathan reached across the table and took her hand, his calloused palm warm against hers. "Then let me help you. Let me stand with you. We will figure this out together." Florence turned her hand in his, lacing their fingers together, and nodded. "Together." The next day, Nathan took Florence into town to meet with the lawyer, a middle-aged man named Arthur Blackwell. He listened carefully as Florence explained the situation, occasionally making notes. "California is actually more progressive than many states when it comes to divorce," Mr. Blackwell said. "We have had no-fault divorce laws since 1872. However, in your case, you would not even need to rely on those. You have clear grounds for divorce based on willful desertion. The fact that your husband abandoned you during a storm, leaving you and your child in danger, and was absent for 4 months without contact would constitute willful desertion in any court." "How long would it take?" Florence asked. "Assuming your husband does not contest it, perhaps 3 to 6 months for everything to be finalized. If he does contest, it could take longer." "And what about Thomas? Could Marcus try to take him from me?" Mr. Blackwell shook his head. "Given the circumstances of his abandonment, it is highly unlikely any judge would grant him custody. You would almost certainly retain full custody of your son." Florence felt relief wash through her. "Then I want to proceed. I want a divorce." "Very well. I will draw up the papers." "Do you know where your husband is staying?" "He was at the saloon yesterday. I do not know if he has a room somewhere or if he has already left town." "I will make inquiries. We need to serve him with the papers." Mr. Blackwell looked at Nathan. "I assume you are here as a friend to Mrs. Olmstead?" "Yes," Nathan said firmly. "Whatever she needs, I am here to help." Over the next few weeks, Florence waited anxiously for word about Marcus. Mr. Blackwell's inquiries revealed that Marcus was still in town, staying in a room above the saloon and apparently running up gambling debts. When he was finally served with the divorce papers, his reaction was predictably angry. He showed up at the ranch 2 days later, drunk and belligerent. Nathan met him in the yard, blocking his path to the house. "You think you can steal my wife?" Marcus slurred. "Think you can just take what is mine?" "Florence is not property," Nathan said calmly, "and she made her choice. Now get off my land before I have you arrested for trespassing." "You are nothing but a—" Marcus launched into a string of profanity that made Nathan's expression go cold and hard. "That is enough. You need to leave. Now." Marcus took a swing at Nathan, a clumsy, drunken punch that Nathan easily avoided. Nathan grabbed Marcus by the shirt and physically propelled him back toward his horse. "If you come back here, if you bother Florence or Thomas again, I will have you thrown in jail. Do you understand me?" Marcus jerked free, stumbling. "She is going to regret this. You both will." But the threat rang hollow, and they all knew it. Marcus climbed onto his horse and rode away, weaving in his saddle. Florence had watched the entire exchange from the window, her heart in her throat. When Nathan came back inside, she threw her arms around him without thinking. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest. "Thank you." Nathan's arms came around her, holding her securely. "You are safe," he said quietly. "I promise, you are safe." They stood like that for a long moment, and Florence let herself imagine, just for a moment, what it would be like if this was her life. If Nathan was not just her employer and protector, but something more. If she could wake up every day in his arms, build a life with him, give Thomas the father he deserved. Soon, she told herself. Once the divorce was final, there would be time to explore these feelings, to see if Nathan felt the same depth of emotion she did. For now, she would be patient. In October, Mr. Blackwell sent word that Marcus had left California, apparently fleeing his gambling debts. He had not contested the divorce, had simply disappeared again. The court proceedings moved forward without him, and in early December, the divorce was finalized. Florence stood in the lawyer's office, holding the decree that officially ended her marriage, and felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She was free. Legally, officially free. Nathan was waiting outside the office, and when Florence emerged, he read the answer in her face. "It is done," she said, smiling. "I am divorced." Nathan's face lit up with a smile that took Florence's breath away. "Then I have a question to ask you, and I want to do this properly." To Florence's shock, Nathan dropped to one knee right there on the boardwalk, drawing startled looks from passers-by. He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond. "Florence Olmstead, you are the strongest, bravest, most beautiful woman I have ever known. You have made my house into a home, brought joy into my life, and shown me what it means to care for someone more than myself. I love you. I have loved you for months now, and I do not want to spend another day without telling you. Will you marry me? Will you let me be a husband to you and a father to Thomas? Will you build a life with me?" Florence felt tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking on the word. "Yes, Nathan, I love you too. I have loved you for so long." Nathan surged to his feet and kissed her, right there on the main street of Ukiah, and Florence did not care who saw. She wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back with all the love and gratitude and joy that filled her heart. When they finally broke apart, breathless and laughing, Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. They were married 3 weeks later on Christmas Eve. The church was decorated with pine boughs and candles, and it seemed like the entire town turned out for the wedding. Sarah Watts cried happy tears throughout the ceremony. Thomas, dressed in his best clothes, stood solemnly beside Nathan as an unofficial best man, taking his role very seriously. Florence wore a new dress, a beautiful cream-colored silk that the women of the church auxiliary had helped her sew. As she walked down the aisle and saw Nathan waiting for her at the altar, his eyes bright with love, she felt her heart swell with happiness. The minister pronounced them husband and wife, and when Nathan kissed her, Florence felt like she was finally, truly home. The wedding celebration lasted late into the night at the ranch. Sarah and several other women had prepared a feast, and there was music and dancing. Florence danced with Nathan, with Thomas, with various townspeople who had become friends over the past months. She laughed more than she had in years, her face hurting from smiling. Late in the evening, when most of the guests had departed, Nathan took Florence's hand and led her outside. The night was cold but clear, stars brilliant overhead. "I have something for you," Nathan said. He led her to the barn and opened the door. Inside, in one of the stalls, stood a beautiful mare, dappled gray with an intelligent face. "She is yours," Nathan said. "I know you lost everything when Marcus left. I wanted you to have something that was yours alone." Florence approached the mare, stroking her soft nose. "She is beautiful. What is her name?" "That is for you to decide. She is yours to name." "Hope," Florence said without hesitation. "I will call her Hope." Nathan smiled and pulled Florence into his arms. "That is perfect. Because you have given me hope, Florence. Hope for a future I never thought I would have. A family, a home, someone to share my life with." "You gave me shelter when I needed it most," Florence said, looking up at him. "You gave me and Thomas a home, safety, and love. You kept your promise. You sheltered us, and you have given us forever." "I will shelter you both forever," Nathan said, echoing the words he had spoken that first day, the unspoken promise that had always been between them. "I swear it. You and Thomas and whatever children we might have in the future. I will shelter all of you, love all of you for the rest of my life." Florence kissed him then, pouring all her love and gratitude and hope into the kiss. When they finally pulled apart, they stood together in the barn, the mare nickering softly behind them, and Florence felt peace settle into her bones. The first year of their marriage was the happiest of Florence's life. Nathan was everything Marcus had not been: attentive, loving, present. He delighted in Thomas, officially adopting him so the boy would carry the Pierce name. He was romantic in small, meaningful ways, bringing Florence wildflowers from the pasture, dancing with her in the kitchen while dinner cooked, reading poetry to her by firelight. And the passion between them was something Florence had never experienced. With Marcus, intimacy had been perfunctory, something she endured rather than enjoyed. With Nathan, it was entirely different. He was patient and tender, making her feel cherished and desired. He took time to learn what pleased her, to show her that marriage could be a source of joy rather than obligation. In the fall of 1876, Florence discovered she was pregnant. She told Nathan one evening after dinner, watching nervously for his reaction. His face lit up with such pure joy that Florence felt tears spring to her eyes. "A baby," he whispered, dropping to his knees in front of her chair and pressing his hand gently to her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Florence asked, though she could see the answer in his face. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Nathan said. He looked up at her, his eyes bright. "You have given me everything, Florence. A wife, a son, and now another child. I am the luckiest man alive." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Nathan was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly worrying that Florence was working too hard or not resting enough. Sarah Watts visited regularly, offering advice and reassurance. Thomas was excited about becoming a big brother, though he did not fully understand what that meant. In May of 1877, Florence went into labor on a warm spring morning. Sarah came to help, along with the doctor from town. Nathan paced anxiously in the main room, holding Thomas while Florence labored for hours. Finally, as the sun was setting, their son was born. He came into the world with a lusty cry that made Nathan laugh with relief from the other room. When Sarah finally let him in to meet his child, Nathan stood beside the bed looking down at Florence holding their red-faced, squalling son, and tears ran unashamedly down his face. "He is perfect," Nathan whispered. "You are amazing. Thank you." They named him Jacob Nathan Pierce, and he became the darling of the household. Thomas took his role as big brother seriously, always wanting to help with the baby. Nathan was a devoted father. waking in the night to help with feedings, walking the floor with Jacob when he was fussy, changing diapers without complaint. Florence watched her family, and sometimes had to pinch herself to believe this was her life now. 2 years ago, she had been abandoned in a storm, desperate and alone. Now she had a loving husband, 2 beautiful sons, and a home filled with warmth and laughter. Over the next few years, the ranch prospered. Nathan's hard work and good judgment paid off, and they were able to expand their cattle herd and purchase more land. Florence continued to manage the household, though she hired a young woman from town to help with the heavier work, as the children demanded more of her attention. In 1879, they had another child, a daughter they named Rose Sarah Pierce, after the wildflowers Florence loved and Sarah Watts, who had become like a mother to Florence. Rose had her father's gray-green eyes and her mother's dark hair, and she had Nathan wrapped around her tiny finger from the moment she was born. Thomas, now 7 years old, was thriving. He attended the school in town and showed a natural aptitude for ranching. He followed Nathan everywhere when he was not in school, learning everything about horses and cattle and working the land. He never asked about Marcus, seemed to have no memory of his biological father. Nathan was the only father he knew, and the bond between them was deep and true. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch was successful enough that they were not wealthy but solidly prosperous. They had enough to live comfortably, to save for the children's futures, to help neighbors when needed. Nathan served on the town council, and Florence was active in the church and community. They had built not just a home but a life, rooted in this place and this community. In the spring of 1882, nearly 7 years after that storm that had changed everything, Florence was working in her garden when she saw a rider approaching. Something about the way he sat his horse seemed familiar, and Florence felt a chill of premonition. As the rider drew closer, Florence recognized him. Marcus. Older, grayer, but unmistakably the man who had been her first husband. Florence straightened, her hand going instinctively to the knife she used for cutting vegetables. Nathan was out checking the south fence with Thomas. Rose was napping inside and Jacob was at school in town. Florence was alone. Marcus dismounted and approached slowly, his hands held out in a gesture of peace. "Florence," he said, "it has been a long time." "Not long enough," Florence said coldly. "What do you want, Marcus?" "I heard you remarried, did well for yourself from the look of things." He glanced around the prosperous ranch. "I am happy for you, truly." Florence did not believe that for a second. "What do you want?" she repeated. Marcus sighed. "I am dying, Florence, got the consumption. Doctor says I have maybe 6 months, maybe less. I'm trying to make peace with folks before I go, make amends where I can." "Amends?" Florence felt anger surge through her. "You want to make amends? You abandoned me and your son in a storm. You left us to die. There are no amends for that, Marcus." "I know," Marcus said quietly. "I know what I did was unforgivable. I was a coward and a fool. I have paid for it, though. Lost everything, been living rough for years. Never could settle down, never could make anything work." He coughed, a wet rattling sound. "I am not asking for forgiveness, Florence. I do not deserve it. I just wanted to see you one more time to tell you I am sorry for what I did to you and to the boy. I am sorry." Florence looked at Marcus, at the shadow of the man he had once been, and felt her anger drain away, replaced by something like pity. "Thomas does not remember you," she said. "Nathan adopted him. He is a Pierce now, and Nathan is the only father he knows." "That is good," Marcus said, and seemed to mean it. "That is how it should be. The boy deserves better than what I could have given him." He coughed again, covering his mouth with a handkerchief that came away flecked with blood. "You look happy, Florence. That is all I wanted to see. That you were happy." I am, Florence said, happier than I ever thought I could be. Marcus nodded and turned to go, then paused. For what it is worth, I am glad you did not give up that day. Glad you survived. You were always stronger than I gave you credit for. He mounted his horse and rode away, and Florence watched him go without sadness or regret. That chapter of her life was closed, and she had no desire to reopen it. She went back to her gardening, and when Nathan came home an hour later, she told him about Marcus's visit. Nathan listened quietly, then pulled Florence into his arms. "Are you all right?" "I am fine," Florence said, and meant it. "He is dying, Nathan. He came to apologize, to make peace, I suppose." "Do you want me to go after him? Make sure he does not come back?" Florence shook her head. "No. I think that was the last time I will ever see him. He is not a threat anymore. He is just a sad, sick man trying to find some peace before the end." "You are kinder than he deserves," Nathan observed. "Maybe, but holding on to anger would only hurt me, not him. I have too much good in my life to waste energy on hating him." Florence looked up at Nathan, at his strong, honest face, and smiled. "I have you, I have our children, I have this life we have built together. That is all that matters." Nathan kissed her forehead. "I love you, Florence Pierce." "And I love you." The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. The children grew. Thomas became a skilled rancher, working the land alongside Nathan. At 15, he was already taller than Florence and showed signs of becoming as broad-shouldered as his adopted father. Jacob, at 5, was quieter than Thomas had been at that age, but equally devoted to learning about the ranch. Rose, at 3, was a whirlwind of energy and mischief, keeping Florence constantly on her toes. In 1885, Florence was surprised to find herself pregnant again. She was 33 now, and they had not planned on more children. But when she told Nathan, his reaction was the same joy he had shown with each of their children. "Another baby," he said wonderingly. "Our family keeps growing." "Are you worried we will not have enough room?" Florence asked, only half joking. The house had gotten crowded with 3 children. "Then we will build on," Nathan said immediately. "Add another room, maybe 2. We will make it work, Florence. We always do." They added 2 rooms to the house that summer, creating more space for the growing family. In November, Florence gave birth to another son, whom they named Daniel Robert Pierce. He was a calm baby, content to watch the world with solemn eyes, so different from Rose's constant activity. Life was full, busy, sometimes chaotic, but always filled with love. Florence would sometimes pause in her work, looking at Nathan playing with the children or watching Thomas demonstrate his roping skills to his younger siblings, and feel overwhelming gratitude. She thought of that desperate woman in the storm, alone and terrified, and marveled at how far she had come. Thomas turned 18 in 1887, and Nathan gifted him with a section of land on the north edge of the property. "For when you are ready to build your own house," Nathan said. "For when you start your own family." Thomas, grown tall and strong, embraced his father with tears in his eyes. "Thank you, Pa, for everything, for being my father, for teaching me, for loving Mama and making her happy." Nathan pulled back to look Thomas in the face. "You are my son in every way that matters. Never doubt that." Florence, watching this exchange, felt her own tears fall. Thomas had no memory of Marcus, no shadow of that painful past hanging over him. He was wholly Nathan's son, raised with love and care and strong values. He was growing into an exceptional young man. In 1890, 15 years after that fateful storm, Florence and Nathan celebrated their 15th wedding anniversary. The children, now ranging from Thomas at 21 to Daniel at 5, organized a celebration at the ranch. Friends and neighbors came from miles around. There was music and dancing, food and laughter. As Florence danced with Nathan under the stars, she thought about the journey that had brought them here. The pain and fear of that storm, the desperation of being abandoned, the terror of watching Thomas's fever, the moment Nathan had appeared through the rain like an answer to prayer. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked, reading her expression. "How you saved us," Florence said. "That day in the storm. You gave us shelter, you gave us forever, just like you promised." Nathan pulled her closer. "You saved me too, you know. I was just existing before you came. You gave me a purpose, a family, a reason to build something lasting. You made this ranch into a home." "We did it together," Florence said. "Together," Nathan agreed. He kissed her then, sweet and tender, and Florence felt the same flutter in her chest that she had felt the first time he kissed her all those years ago. The years continued to flow past, marked by milestones and small joys. Thomas married a lovely young woman named Elizabeth in 1891, and they built their house on the land Nathan had given him. They had their first child, a daughter, in 1893, making Nathan and Florence grandparents for the first time. Jacob showed an interest in becoming a veterinarian, and they sent him to school in Sacramento to study. Rose grew into a beautiful young woman with her father's steady nature and her mother's fierce independence. Daniel, the baby, was content working the ranch with Nathan, showing no interest in leaving. In 1900, as the new century dawned, Florence and Nathan stood on their porch watching the sun set over the land they had worked for 25 years. Thomas's house was visible on the north ridge, smoke rising from the chimney. Jacob was home visiting from Sacramento, inside playing with Rose's 2 children while Rose and her husband prepared dinner. Daniel was in the barn, tending to the horses. "We have built a good life," Nathan said quietly. Florence took his hand, lacing their fingers together as she had that first time in the kitchen when everything had changed between them. "The best life," she agreed. "You kept your promise, Nathan. You sheltered us. You gave us forever." "And I would do it all again," Nathan said. He turned to her, his face lined with age but his eyes still that striking gray-green that had captivated her from the beginning. "Every day with you has been a gift, Florence. Every single day." "I love you," Florence said, the words as true and powerful as they had been the first time she spoke them. "I love you too. Always have, always will." They stood together as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. Behind them, the house was full of family, full of laughter and life and love. The ranch stretched out around them, prosperous and well-maintained, a testament to years of hard work and dedication. Florence thought again of that woman in the storm, desperate and abandoned, and sent up a silent prayer of gratitude. The storm had been terrible, but it had brought her here to this man, to this life. Sometimes the worst moments led to the best outcomes. Sometimes being lost was the first step to being found, and she had been found by a cowboy with kind eyes and a gentle heart who had kept his promise to shelter them forever, who had become not just her husband but her partner, her best friend, the love of her life, who had given her sons a father, given her a home, given her a future she had never dared to dream of. As the stars began to appear overhead, Florence leaned into Nathan's embrace, and together they watched the night settle over their land, over their family, over the life they had built together from the ashes of Florence's darkest moment. It was a good life, a blessed life, a life filled with the kind of love that most people only read about in stories, and it had all begun with a storm, a desperate prayer, and a cowboy who had said, "I will shelter you both forever." He had kept that promise. And Florence had no doubt he would continue to keep it for all the days they had left together, and in whatever came after. They had built something lasting, something real, something that would endure long after they were gone, carried forward by the children they had raised and the grandchildren who would come after. Forever, it turned out, was not just a promise. It was a choice, made every day, renewed with every sunrise, strengthened by every challenge overcome together. And Florence and Nathan had chosen each other, every single day since that first desperate meeting in the storm, and they would continue to choose each other until their last breath. That was the real miracle. Not being saved from the storm, but finding someone worth building a life with. Someone who saw her worth when she had felt worthless, who offered strength when she was weak, who gave love freely without expectation of return. Someone who transformed a promise spoken in desperation into a lifetime of devotion. As they finally turned to go inside, to join their family for dinner, Florence sent up one more prayer. Not a prayer of desperation this time, but one of gratitude. For the storm that had brought her here, for the cowboy who had saved her, for the life they had built together, for every precious moment of their forever. Inside, the house was warm and bright with lamplight, filled with the voices of the people they loved most. Nathan held the door for Florence, and she stepped through into the warmth, into the light, into the life they had created together. Their forever was just beginning.